All right, just a few quick things to go through here. I've missed a few very good, important things that have been happening. Most of them, most of the good things happening with RFK Jr., and then the same old, how they're going after Donald Trump. So, as I progress in this book and the writing is starting to articulate and starting to move things into different categories, I'm trying to get caught up on what is happening, and I'm still far behind. With the book, I'm probably in mid June right now when the Jordan Peterson interview was banned. The full interview, you can find clips and everything. And there's some really awesome clips in that. So I'm glad that I was able to grab those before. And then today I spent a little time that I had watching some of the interview with Tucker Carlson and RFK Jr. from just a couple days ago. So I'm going to play that too at a later time on the same channel. I have a whole channel. I have a Kennedy, two Kennedy, and Trump channels, and one of them is banned for now. But I'll be back on the 24th on that one. Until then, I'm going to continue with all of this content right here. And what I really enjoyed about the Tucker Carlson interview, one of the best things is he says right up front, this is one of the only interviews you'll probably find where RFK Jr. is not talking about vaccines, which is like, oh, cool. That means you can actually play the whole thing without having to worry about Google censoring it for now. I'm sure they'll find something else. So make sure that you watch that. It's about 80 minutes long. Tucker on Twitter. It's all over YouTube. I'll be backing it up too. It's a great interview. There's just so much content, and we'll see what happens with that. But I want to get into this article that is up here. Let's go take a look at this. This is something that I saw Kennedy post. This is an article, The Other Populist in the Race. Fascinating article. And take this advertisement out. And this is from Harry Scher, August 14th, 2023. So I missed a few things on August 14th, 2023. Read a few of this. We'll definitely cover that. But before we get there, and okay, I'm still trying to upload a video, but I also wanted to go to Kennedy 24. Team Kennedy. There it is. So I can share this one instead. Excellent. Okay, so sharing that. He's got a few good clips, and we're always kind of like, oh. And so here is the full. Look at this, another one. I mean, he's just doing so much. Oh, this is a good one. This one I have not heard. The full interview with James O'Keefe. I think I'm going to play that.
Is fear itself the biggest issue facing America right now?
I don't know if it's the biggest issue, but it has become weaponized by elements within the technocracy and in the corporate kleptocracy to engineer compliance of Americans with things that most people would not put up with under normal circumstances. It's like Americans know innately that the government is not supposed to censor us, and yet we put up with it. It's been recognized forever that fear is a governing tool, particularly for totalitarian elements. If you manipulate them with fear, people will choose security over constitutional rights. Franklin Roosevelt said to people the biggest fear is fear itself. If we allow ourselves to be manipulated by fear, we will lose everything that we value.
Do you ever get scared that these government agencies, these pharmaceutical companies, are going to try to physically harm you or the people that you care about?
I don't get scared of that, and I don't worry about it, but I'm aware of that danger. I feel like this is my country, and I have a duty to fight that kind of stuff. There was a generation in this country in 1776 that put their lives on the line. A lot of them died. and put their fortunes on the line and their property and their reputations, their livelihood, in order to give us the constitutional rights that we now take for granted. And in 1 year, we saw so many of those constitutional rights just eviscerated. And we have to be willing to make the same kind of sacrifices they did. There's a lot worse things to me than dying. And one of those is having my kids grow up in America where they do not have the constitutional rights that I grew up with. If you like this video and you want to help me become president of the United States, go to Kennedy24.com and donate now.
Another excellent one right there. And this is another area where we hear what he's talking about with 1776. This is exactly what Donald Trump has been talking about for at least the last 5-6 years. You can even go back and find quotes. He's been talking about the same thing about our country, and we cannot fear, and you cannot fear death. And this is about the love of our country. And there are evil forces in this country who are trying to change that, who are trying to take away this great nation. It won't happen, but they will continue to keep trying. And we will always be here too. So this is another one of those instances where when I hear Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talk, he and Trump are talking about a lot of the same things, a lot of them. So that's always great to hear, but that's another great interview. So while all that is happening, at least you have one good candidate who was able to get out there in some very interesting ways, where President Trump is really having to fight the defensive fight against all of these fake charges, all of these fake allegations that will continue on through the primaries, through the 2024 presidential election. It will all continue, possibly up until election night, maybe even past then. Like he said, like President Trump said, you come after me, I'm coming after you. They're going after him. They're trying to use the strong arm of the government to go after Donald Trump. This may be their last chance, because if he gets in office, he could do the exact same thing. They're setting a bad precedent here. This is a bad standard that they are setting to go after a United States president in this way. And the double standard is very clear, and people are seeing it. I have no doubt people are seeing through that. So with that being said, let's go back to the article by from the American Conservative, the other populist in the race. RFK is Trump's temperamental opposite. Let's see. This is from April. From August 14th. And so I'm going to read this here and maximize the screen a little bit. Easier on the eyes. Everything looks better when it's easier on the eyes. Okay, so by Harry Scher. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has raised eyebrows as the first right sympathetic populist to run as a Democrat since William Jennings Bryan. Launching with 20 paid staff and functioning now with 70, Kennedy's campaign has latched on to several issues important to mainstream Republicans: COVID, tyranny, censorship, government surveillance, as well as to the dissident right, public health threats posed by chemicals in food and water, ending forever wars. The difference is the right frames these issues. The difference is the right frames these issues as matters of social cohesion and public order, while Kennedy uses the language of democracy and freedom. We met at Pier 26 in Manhattan on the Hudson River, a body of water that has played a central role in Kennedy's career as an environmental activist. He was named one of Time magazine's Heroes of the Planet in 1999 for his work as a prosecuting attorney for Riverkeeper, a Hudson River conservation group. He later founded the Waterkeeper Alliance as an umbrella organization for similar groups in other rivers, lakes, bays, and watersheds. When he resigned as its president in 2020, the Waterkeeper Alliance had hundreds of branches in dozens of countries. His environmentalism defies a neat ideological framing. Free market capitalism, he says, is the core solution for every environmental problem because a true free market promotes efficiency. Efficiency means the elimination of waste, and pollution is waste. What polluters do, he says in a calm and almost academic tone, that's very true, is they make themselves rich by making everybody else poor. They raise standards of livings for themselves by lowering quality of life for everybody else. And they do that by escaping the discipline of the free market, by cheating, essentially, by forcing the public to pay their production costs. A true free market would require us to properly value our natural resources. And it's the undervaluation of those resources that causes us to use them wastefully, he says. When he describes policy solutions for pollution, Kennedy mentions habitat restoration and regenerative agriculture, but gets sidetracked on the topic of government subsidies and investment in carbon credits. He says the Kennedy administration would build a grid system so that we can have a true marketplace for energy that rewards the lowest cost providers. Interesting. Kennedy's articulation of a properly ordered dynamic of market forces on the natural environment is slow and thoughtful. At some points, he stops mid-sentence, stays quiet, and then continues with a clearer expression of his thought. In railing against polluters, he speaks with a sort of zeal that only could come from decades spent searching through legal discovery and preparing for litigation against them. This guy is a very high-profile lawyer, maybe second to his cousin, John Kennedy Jr., perhaps. Reading on. Kennedy's political instincts, especially in foreign policy, were formed by his uncle, President John F. Kennedy. The candidate's June speech in New Hampshire, Peace and Diplomacy, paid homage to his uncle's 1963 speech at American University's commencement, A Strategy for Peace. The speech mentions my uncle 19 times. And that's, I think that's another thing that really stands out about RFK Jr. is it really seems like he is just continuing on with what his uncle did, with what his father did, and he's continuing on with that presidential legacy, which was disrupted, which was stopped by evil forces. Isn't that very similar to what has happened with President Trump, who was doing all of these wonderful things in these 4 years, and then it got stopped? And really, you could say in 2 years, and then it got stopped. 3 years, maybe, and then it got stopped. But however you want to see it, the similarities are very interesting to me, at least to me. Okay, let's continue on. The younger Kennedy compares today's proxy war in Ukraine between the United States and Russia to the threat, I just want to make this a little bit bigger, to the threat of nuclear war faced by JFK. Biden should be on the phone with Putin, Kennedy says impatiently during our interview. In his New Hampshire speech, he fleshed out this idea with a tricolon set of facts from recent diplomatic history, followed by a rhetorical question that was met with applause. JFK met with Khrushchev. Nixon met with Brezhnev. Reagan met with Gorbachev. Can't Biden meet with Putin? At least part of Kennedy's appeal can be attributed to his lucid memory of 1960s global conflict, not as geopolitical historiography, but as a family affair. Frequently recalling events. As a boy, Kennedy reminisces about his uncle's science advisor, Jerome Weiser, describing the effects of atmospheric testing in the Pacific, a Russian spy coming to the Kennedy home, the famous red telephone that the president used to directly communicate with Khrushchev. Kennedy suggests that the present conflict could have been avoided. The Russians had already agreed to two eminently reasonable treaties, the Minsk Accords in 2015 and the Second Peace Agreement in April 2022, that everybody signed, he says. This refers to a tentative deal struck in Istanbul, which was reportedly scuttled after British Prime Minister Boris Johnson visited Kiev to communicate to the West veto. And the Russians were acting in good faith, removing troops from Ukraine, is what Kennedy says. Kennedy's views on foreign policy have attracted the attention of realists on the right, including former Trump administration official Douglas MacArthur. I think he's identified the absence of anyone left of center in the Democratic Party who is by nature committed to an America First outlook when it comes to foreign and defense policy, McGregor said. There is nobody else out there. The retired colonel has contributed to a Substack called the Kennedy Beacon, which is funded by American Values 2024, a pro-Kennedy super PAC. McGregor, who says that the emergence of a third major political party would make Kennedy and Trump a very powerful combination, affirmed that he is well known as a supporter of President Trump and is simply welcoming the return of rationality and common sense to the Democratic Party, which is what, in my judgment, RFK represents. Now, this is very powerful and very notable for all of us who are looking into the David Crowley case and researching it to look up who this guy is, Douglas MacArthur, because he was in David Crowley's documentary, The Rise. A very interesting guy, and has been interviewed personally by David Crowley. So just throwing that out there. But he makes a really good point here, and I just want to reread this because it is a very interesting point that he said, and we are talking about a third major political party. This is what this country needs. Now, RFK has already shot this down, saying he's not going to be Trump's vice president. That's what he is saying. Well, can we flip the switch for a second and wonder the possibility of Trump becoming Kennedy's vice president? A lot of people would say, no, that would never happen. Trump's ego wouldn't allow it. This would put Trump as possibly the head of the Senate. It would be some interesting stuff happening in the Senate if Trump was there. And all these scenarios are interesting to think about, to play out, but I do like this, that he says a very powerful combination. And that's exactly what I think certain evil powers are afraid of, is that the combination and the things that RFK Jr. and President Trump are saying, the combination of that is very powerful and is a big threat to the evil establishment that wants to control everything and take down this nation, that does not care about seemingly does not care about our Constitution, does not respect our Constitution, does not respect the values of this country, the founding of this country, the founders of this country. They want something else. And it will look like socialism, but it will be far worse, in my opinion. So that was interesting. I really, really liked what McGregor said there. He is a well-known supporter of President Trump, and he is simply welcoming the return of rationality and common sense to the Democratic Party, which is what, in my judgment, RFK represents. No doubt. I totally agree with that. RFK represents so much for what some of us thought the Democratic Party was and should be and could be again. It doesn't need to just be one good party and one bad party, or two bad parties, and so we have to have a third party. We could have a viable third party, fourth party, fifth party candidate and still have two great candidates in these two major parties. And that's what I think we have. And I think that is a big, big threat, because I think they just were expecting Joe Biden. And I don't know if they were expecting President Trump to run for re-election right now, but that is what's happening. And look at the response. Look at how they're coming after him. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. They've never come after a president like this. And I think they're going to, their cupeth will overfloweth. It's going to happen. And it's not going to be pretty for them. It's not going to be pretty for this country. And the question is, what are we going to do? So we'll see. And to each their own. The similarities between Kennedy and Trump. The similarities between the Kennedy and Trump campaigns are difficult to miss. I tell Kennedy that Tucker Carlson, on a July episode of Russell Brand's podcast, included him in a list of 4 populist presidential candidates, along with Teddy Roosevelt, Ross Perot, and Donald Trump. Kennedy agrees, laughing, and adds his own suggestion. I would say Andrew Jackson would fit in there. Very interesting. Kennedy points to an Associated Press poll published the morning of our interview, showing that 44% of respondents had a great deal, or quite a bit, of confidence that the votes of the next presidential election will be counted accurately. We ought to have 100% confidence in our voting system, he says. If only 44% of the people are confident that the votes are going to be counted, he continues, that means 56% believe that democracy is badly broken. And that's terrible. We can clearly make a voting machine that works, he says, recalling a recent trip to Vegas, a city mainly funded by machines that never make mistakes, and using the example of ATMs, which never give you more money than you ask for. That's great. On trade, too, Kennedy and Trump share many priorities. Everything I'm going to do is about rebuilding the American middle class, he says, echoing language from the first campaign of his potential Republican rival. He says, I don't want a free trade agreement. I want a fair trade agreement. This article is so awesome. It really points out all of the similarities between these two great candidates. I love it. I love it. Let's continue on. What fair trade entails points to one of the most consistent themes of his campaign's messaging. Kennedy cites a famous visit his father took to the Mississippi Delta in 1967. Journalists saw Senator Kennedy weep, seeing a disheveled toddler on the floor of a one-room shack. He held the toddler and asked, "How can a country like this allow it?" RFK Jr. mentions his father's Delta trip and connects it to poverty today and the issue of trade. If you're making sneakers with slave labor, paying workers in rice, and they're competing against American workers, that's unfair. Kennedy notionally accepts the efficacy of tariffs as a mechanism to compensate for low wages in another country, but contextualizes his support around the goal of protecting the American worker. The position for which RFK Jr. is most famous, which has cemented his appeal on the right, is his opposition to Big Pharma and what he calls the medical cartel. He compares it to the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned against in his 1961 farewell address. According to Kennedy, his uncle quickly learned the truth of his predecessor's warnings. The intelligence agencies had devolved from protecting the public interest to providing a continuous pipeline of new wars to feed the military-industrial complex. In the case of Big Pharma, the culprits are the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Food and Drug Administration, the National Institutes of Health, and the Department of Health and Human Services. These government agencies are now serving to promote the mercantile interests of the pharmaceutical industry, Kennedy says. Claiming most federal agencies are captured by their respective industries of concern, Kennedy steers his reflections to an arena. Kennedy steers his reflections to the arena of political life where he seems to be most at home, litigation. And that's why he's suing Google. Watch out, YouTube. With the passion of a seasoned personal injury lawyer, he cites the derailment of a Norfolk Southern train in East Palestine, Ohio, the emergence of 5G cellular networks, the former EPA official Jess Rowland's dismissal of a study linking glyphosate in Roundup to cancer as recent instances of agency capture, each of which he has pursued or is pursuing in court. Kennedy has hypothesized that his tremored voice, caused by a neurological disease called spasmodic dystonia, could be attributed to a flu vaccine from 1996. He says his administration would open up data banks on vaccines to everybody, which right now the CDC won't let anybody see. According to the candidate, 95, maybe 99% of Americans would agree with me if they knew my real position on vaccine, which is there should be good safety science and nobody should be forced to take them against their will. There should be good safety science and nobody should be forced to take them against their will. The theme connecting these threads is the corrupt merger of state and corporate power, a phrase he repeated twice during the opening minutes of his April announcement speech in Boston. But Kennedy must remain sensitive to the positions of his own party. He is running as a Democrat, after all. On many issues, the electorate is extremely polarized. In the case of on many issues, the electorate is extremely polarized. In the case of immigration, one March Associated Press poll reported that 68% of Republican respondents want to reduce the number of asylum seekers allowed in, compared with 26% of Democrats. Kennedy says he wants to open up legal immigration, making it easier and faster for people who offer substantial benefits to this country to come into this country. That's exactly what President Trump has been saying. It's the exact same thing. And yet they call President Trump a racist for saying this because he wants people to come in legally, which is what Kennedy also wants. And they want the best and brightest. They want people who can contribute, not sex traffickers, not drug traffickers, not human traffickers, not criminals. That's what he's saying. And there are statistics that show that that is what is happening. Those people have the open door, and the good people have to jump through so many hoops. And it's virtually impossible for them to come in the legal way, or it takes a very, very long time. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be the other way. It should make it hard for the criminals, hard for the drug traffickers, hard for the human traffickers, for the child traffickers. It should be harder for them, harder for the criminals, and it should be easier for the good people that want to come here for the right reason, because they love this country and this is the greatest country on God's green earth. And that is the truth. Kennedy recalls traveling to the southern border and hearing that Mexican workers who cross the border every day to work in Yuma weren't getting through because of illegal problems. We ought to make those visas easier to get back and forth. While stopping the illegal immigration altogether, he shies away from nativist language. When I bring up abortion, Kennedy first references his aunt Eunice Shriver as an example of growing up in a milieu where there are people on both sides. From him, the arguments that he regularly applies to vaccines also applies to abortion. Bodily autonomy means the right to make medical choices. Even federal funding for Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers does not give Kennedy pause. Everybody should have access to good medical care, he says. You can't tell poor people that because they don't have the money, they have to bring a baby to term. His civil libertarianism is slightly more relaxed on the issue of gender surgeries for children. While hesitant to impose federal authority, Kennedy believes the FDA ought to be making really strong advisories about it, backed up by really, really clear data that state policymakers can use to make rational decisions. Kennedy sees no room for the use of puberty blockers among children without parental permission. And with parental permission, I'm still deeply, deeply troubled by it. When I tell Kennedy that Canada is considering extending medical assistance and dying to people with mental illness, Kennedy appears deflated. After 19 seconds of dead air between my question and his response, he says, I don't even like to think about that issue. Calling the situation a tragedy, he says, his position would be to come down on the side of personal freedom, freedom to choose, although I'm not going to bed feeling good about it. When I press him, he takes a drink of water and says, I'd have to think about that. I've had suicide in my own family, and I see the impact that has on the whole community, multi-generational impacts. I have to really think about that. I didn't even know that was an issue. The sort of personal reflection and perhaps ideological change that occurred during that brief exchange reveals a man whose political romanticism is formed by what he calls a profound spiritual realignment. Kennedy's religious identity is sort of a Catholic transcendentalism informed by the devotional practices that saturated his childhood, plus the language of the 12-step program in which he still participates. Kennedy says that his faith was pretty much the whole ball game in his recovery from his 14-year drug addiction that began shortly after death of his father. He is attached to St. Augustine, whose biography he read during his month in a Puerto Rico prison in 2001 for attempting to impede a naval bombing exercise on Vizcaya Island. He is the author of a 32-page children's book on St. Francis. The candidate tells me he gets on the phone every day as a sponsor for a 12-step program, applying the same therapeutic languages he uses to describe his own recovery. Kennedy believes the nation has endured a set of traumas: his uncle's death, his father's death, Martin Luther King's death, the Vietnam War, 9/11, and COVID, that have forced us into where we are today. He says his campaign is about bringing the country back to 1963. Good stuff there. Just a few more sentences there, but I think you get the idea. It's a very, very powerful voice. And the Democrats are lucky to have him. Any Democrat voter should really be strongly considering voting for him over Biden for so many reasons. Kennedy is going to probably make it out to Maui before Biden does. I'm sure Trump would have been there if he wasn't dealing with all of this drama that is going on. Just all of this garbage that is happening with him. So let me just, speaking of Trump, I'm just going to go over here to Truth Social and see if there's anything there, and then in this live stream very soon here. So again, here we go. More of the polls. We know what the polls show, and I think people they get it. So let's see that. I'm not seeing any new quotes. So it does feel like Trump is he's not speaking as much, obviously, and seems like we're not hearing a lot from him. But it's also the censorship, but obviously he's not going to be censored here, and he needs to stay out in front of this. And I hope that he is. I hope that he will continue to, because the country needs him, and the country needs RFK. They need both of these guys. Both these guys have a lot to offer. Let me see. Let's go to August 14th. This is a statement from the Trump campaign. Okay, here we go again. More of the same here. There's another one here, and I don't know. I heard that Biden had no comment when he was asked about the Maui thing. So let's, I don't know if there's a video here or not. There is. Okay, great.
And warmest regards.
So let's see what President Trump has to say about Maui. What's happening in Maui here?
I would like to express my sympathy and warmest regards to the people of Hawaii, and specifically all of those who have been so gravely and irreparably hurt by the tragedy of the wildfires in Maui, something the likes of which have seldom been seen anywhere at any time. The death caused by this catastrophic event will be far worse than ever expected now that houses and cars and other areas are being inspected. The sad thing is, it should never have happened. Our government was not prepared, and very importantly, the aftermath is going very poorly, with the governor of the island wanting to do nothing but blame it on global warming and other things that just happened to pop into his head. When asked about it today, as he was getting into a car, perhaps coming home from the beach, where he has been spending a great deal of time, Crooked Joe Biden, the most incompetent president in the history of our country, with a laugh and a smile, said he had no comment on the death and the tragedy. To say no comment is oftentimes fine, but to be smiling when you say it, especially against such a tragedy as this, is absolutely horrible and unacceptable. It is a disgraceful thing that Joe Biden refuses to help or comment on the tragedy in Maui, just as he refused to help or comment on the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, for a very, very long time. In any event, hopefully everyone will be able to pull together so that a horrible situation does not get even worse. To the families affected, I give you my love and sympathy. Nothing can ever replace your loved ones, but you will always have the memories and will feel their great love surrounding and embracing you. Together, we will continue to carry their legacy forward, and I love you all very much. Thank you.
Great message there. Now there is another one that I want to play from President Trump. This one is about 4 minutes. Sorry. Let me just cue this up here. Make sure it's in the best quality. I think that's always nice. All right, so let me share this tab here.
It is now 100% proven that the
Oh, modern technology. How I love thee. Let me count the ways.
It is now 100% proven that the Biden crime family received more than $20 million from foreign countries while Crooked Joe was vice president, and probably a lot more than that. That's just the money they found. Not one of Joe Biden's defenders has even attempted to explain what Joe and his family did, including his children and his grandchildren. What were they doing getting all of this money? I believe we have a compromised president. He was bribed, and now he's being blackmailed. He's a Manchurian candidate. That's why Crooked Joe is letting other countries walk all over the United States. He's afraid to bring it up. He doesn't want to talk about it. He's petrified of China because they know exactly how much money has been given to him, and they know exactly where it is. China has paid him a fortune. Just think of what China has gotten for all that money. Biden shut down my administration's initiative targeting Chinese spies in the United States. He shut it down cold. He let China off the hook for COVID. He shut down the investigation into the origins of the China virus. He did nothing as China began setting up bases in Cuba, taking over South America, and threatening Taiwan. They even took over the Panama Canal. We spent a fortune building it. Jimmy Carter's administration sold it for $1. We lost 36,000 people building the Panama Canal. The mosquitoes got them, malaria. The mosquitoes got them. And now China controls it. Russia and China are even doing military exercises near the Aleutian Islands, right off the coast of Alaska. And Biden sits back on his hands. He does nothing. This never would have happened if I was president. If they even thought about it, I would have shut it down instantly. There's no way they would have done any of this kind of thing, including Russia invading Ukraine would have never happened. And China wouldn't even be thinking about Taiwan right now. Crooked Joe's corruption is a glaring threat to national security. Between the millions and millions of dollars he's gotten from China and the millions of dollars from Ukraine, Joe Biden's greed and criminality is going to get us into World War III. We're going to be in World War III with this guy. Grossly incompetent man. Now the corrupt Biden DOJ is continuing the cover-up with the appointment of a special counsel to block further investigation. It's the very same U.S. attorney who cut Hunter Biden the scandalous plea deal that was such a scam it didn't survive the barest scrutiny in court. It was done under what's called blue slip. It wasn't picked in that position by President Trump. It was picked by the Democrat senators in the state. It's called a blue slip. You'll check it out. But they picked him. I didn't pick him. This is corruption like our country has never seen before. That is why as soon as I am reelected, I will appoint a real special counsel, or maybe you'll call it a special prosecutor, whatever you want to call it, you can, to look at all of these bribes, kickbacks, and other crimes, as well as the shameless attempt at a cover-up. Justice will be done. The Biden crime family will be looked at. We have to get there first. We have to win the election. They're trying to step in my way at every path because the one person they don't want to run is Donald Trump. But when we get there, the Biden crime family will pay a price like other people are being forced to pay. And that price will be very, very substantial. It'll be fair. But you know what? If they're guilty, they're going to be guilty. What they are doing to justice in this country has never even been thought of before. Thank you very much.
So there is another great speech right there. Trump is doing it, man. He's really doing it. And it's so good to hear him talk like that. And he's always on the defensive, and it's always like it comes off as negative for people who may not understand how much they're going after him. So I get it, but I don't believe it's warranted or fair. But this is the last one I'm going to play here before I go. Just going to play this. Turn that caption off. Let's listen to this.
Hot off the press today, new Fox News power rankings and what they reveal about the state of the race right now with the first debate fast approaching. It is 1 week from today as we say good morning. Midweek, I'm Bill Hemmer. Hello to you at home.
Hello.
And hello to you.
Hello, I'm Dana Perino. This is America's Newsroom. You know, when it's Power Rankings Day, I think we get the special music.
Let's
I think
hope
so. I mean, that it really gets me in the mood for a big debate, and that happens just a week from today in Milwaukee. Our Power Rankings show former President Trump keeping a firm grip on the party.
So here's what we have, Dana. He is far and away the front runner. Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott are in contention. You've got 5 others in the conversation, and the rest are on the outside looking in.
The former president is dominating on endorsements. He's racked up more than 80, and the rest of the field is splitting about a dozen between them.
So Ron DeSantis has billed himself as the one candidate best equipped to win a general election. But polls suggest Republican voters don't agree with that. Nearly 60% right now, they side with the former President Trump.
The first debate giving candidates a chance to turn the tide. Here's what voters say they want to hear.
We have to fix the border. I mean, this migrant situation, it's insane. If somebody doesn't address and really fix the situation, I think, you know, we're really seeing a lot of America in decline.
They keep saying the migrant situation. It's not a migrant situation. It's an illegal immigration situation. And there is a difference. There is a big, big difference, because nobody's against migrants. Nobody's against people coming here. We're all migrants, right? We're all at least part migrants at some point. But I don't believe that's the real issue. The issue, at least with that issue, is that it's coming here illegally. In this country, you do things illegal and there are consequences. Why would there not be consequences for entering the country illegally? What type of precedent, what type of what does that say to criminals? Doesn't that open up the door for them? And that is one of the big problems. But I get what she's saying. It's maybe she'd just be dancing around words because they don't want to use illegal immigration because somehow that is, you know, that's racist or something. But that is exactly what it is. It's people coming into this country illegally, and we need to call it what it is, because that's what it is. But they can call it migration. We need to fix the migration problem, et cetera, if they want to lump that little and then think, oh, this is just a small little part of the issue with the migration. There's a bigger issue happening here. But that's everybody's choice, to each their own. So I will continue on with I don't know who this guy is.
Divided right now. I think the person that can communicate that message to say, hey, I'm going to lift everybody.
We need a stable economy. Immigration is a big issue.
Immigration.
Put our veterans first. And listen, common sense policy. A president with strong business sense to be able to negotiate for America.
Holmes is here with analysis, but we begin with Alexis McAdams. She's in her.
We had it and we have it. We have that. That's what President Trump is. That's why he's the best person for this job for many, many reasons. And one of the main reasons why President Trump is the best person for this job, first of all, he's already done this job. He's done a great job at doing the job here. He's changed the game by doing it. And by the way that he approached the office of the President of the United States is so different from everything that we've been hearing. Well, it's politics. It's politics. It's not politics. This is life and death. This is our lives and this is our deaths. And this all comes back around to do whatever is best for this country, whatever is best for this nation. And if you want to be here, you need to contribute. You need to contribute. That's what I think, anyways. Even, you know, there's a lot of people that don't. They want to sit on the sideline. Look at how many people vote, and all of a sudden we have all these people, record number of voters, and just even from what they say, 81 million votes for Joe Biden. yeah, I don't know. I'm just not seeing it, not buying it. But hey, that's what freedom of speech is. And people like Ronald Reagan once said, he was in a town hall discussion with RFK Sr., and they were going back and forth. And Ronald Reagan said, hey, everybody has the right to be wrong. And that's what it is, right? So, I mean, freedom of speech should not be a threat. When freedom of speech becomes a threat, then the Constitution, this country, becomes a threat. What this country stands for, what it was founded on, all of that becomes a big threat, because freedom of speech matters. It really matters, and we need to respect it, even if we don't like it. And that includes all types of speeches there, right? And people can make their own discernment and their own judgment of what is right, what is good speech, and what is bad speech. We know the difference. But when you try to hide it, when you try to hide the other side of the discussion, no matter what it is, no matter how crazy it may seem, it shows they don't respect freedom of speech. Anyways, I'm way off topic, way off gear. I need to get going. I'm gonna go for it.
Home away from home. It's called Des Moines. It's in Iowa. Hi, Alexis.
Hi, Dana and Bill. That's right. Feeling right at home here in Iowa. We can tell you that this morning, Senator Tim Scott breaking into the top 3 in those Fox News power rankings that were just released. We caught up with him here on the fairgrounds, asked him why he thinks he's moving up in these polls. He said it's because of his common sense conservative policies. Listen. Do you think you are going to be able to move up in those rankings?
Well, the good news is we continue to move up. More importantly, I'm not spending any time watching polls. I'm spending all my time watching people. So polls don't vote, but people do. So I'm going to spend my time getting to know the average person in the state even better. And so far, so good. I expect that our momentum will continue to increase every day.
This morning, Donald Trump remaining the clear frontrunner, the former president leading by 30 to 40 points in most national polls, followed by Ron DeSantis in second place. The Florida governor remains the main alternative to Trump. And in most national polls, Tim Scott is a distant third.
These things are crazy. What crime has Trump committed? He has not committed any crime. He's not the orchestrator of any fictitious thing that happened on January 6th. And Discovery will be a great time to show that, to actually show through Discovery what really happened on January 6th. And that's what I hope. We know what the prosecutors are going to show, what they're going to say, and the fake witnesses, and how people feel like they were egged on. But the truth is going to weigh in. The truth is going to show that Donald Trump on January 6th wanted people to be peaceful and never incited any riot or anything like that. If anyone incited any riots or any hatred, it was the people who committed voter fraud. Those are the ones, and the people who were trying to bully people from asking questions, trying to stifle freedom of speech on voter fraud issues. Voter fraud has been happening for a long time. It's not just about 2020. It happened in 2000. It happened, who knows? It may have happened in 2016 too. But the voter fraud issue is a big, big deal, and we need to fix it. We need to fix that. You got to have same-day voting, paper ballots, the voter machines. We don't need that. We didn't need that for a long time. There's no reason that we need it now. There's just too much. They don't understand and I remember watching the voter fraud hearings, and the people who were the congressmen and the senators. You could tell they don't understand technology. They don't understand how technology works. So they will not understand how easily voter fraud can be done through technology. That's just a fact. That's how technology works. The source code, you can go in there and you can change things so easily that it's not good for the country. It's not safe. And if we want to make sure that all of our elections are fair and balanced, we got to get rid of digital voting. That's my view on it anyways. All right, just a few more minutes and then we're done. This time I promise, 2 minutes.
But he's the only candidate to pull double-digit support in more than one state, according to our Fox polls. So we know that campaign fundraising is key, right, to win this race. Trump reigns supreme on that, too, pulling in $54 million in just the first half of the year. DeSantis getting money from large individual donors. And
where's all this money go? That's what I want to know.
That up, but also spending a lot with his campaign. One of those major donors also, Bill and Dana, is now reportedly getting cold feet. Though it's a different story for Tim Scott, who's had more than 53,000 unique donors who have given smaller sums, just around $200 each. And Scott's just moved over $22 million from his Senate campaign, so he has lots of cash on hand. So he's using it to focus on spending big money on those TV ads in Iowa and New Hampshire, and we've seen him here on the ground.
Tim Scott could be the vice president, the next vice president, if RFK turns the job down.
Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, and Mike Pence are listed as in the conversation. The rankings follow a pretty busy campaign stop for everyone at the state fair in Iowa. And Trump, DeSantis, and Scott all worked these crowds to win over the voters this weekend, and they're paying close attention.
I think these voters take it really seriously. They pay attention to what's going on in the national campaign, and they pay attention to the national polls.
And every candidate, Bill and Dana, except Donald Trump, wants voters to know, hey, it's still early here in this campaign and in these national polls for the 2024 Republican primary, but it's really not going to be that early for long. The caucus here in Iowa is on January 15th. Back to you.
All right, Alexis, thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
All right, and I'm Greg Fernandez, and we're out of here. God bless you all. Thank you all for joining me here. I really appreciate it, and for just paying attention to this topic here. This is episode number 20, and there's going to be a lot more. I'm going to try to do as many of these as I can, just to for my book, so I can go back if I missed anything. But for people who may not read the book, or for people who don't have time, who just want to get caught up, or even for people 10 years later down the road who want to go back and see what was it like, what was happening almost in real time. And that's what I'm going to try to bring here. So beam me up, Scotty. Let's grow. Let's go. God bless you all. Until next time, be well.